So earlier this week, the PGA of America did a crazy. I don't know if it's not going to work out. It might. They announced that Keegan Bradley, 38-year-old Keegan Bradley, would become the second youngest Ryder Cup captain, like in modern Ryder Cup history. The only one younger was Arnold Palmer, who was a playing captain like a half century ago. Shane Ryan wrote the book, The Ryder Cup, The Cup They Couldn't Lose, going into Whistling Straits. Also, I like to mention this. If you're a Ryder Cup fan, the Ryder Cup Run podcast, it's like a 7-series podcast, was riveting and in-depth and one of my favorite listens, and I go back and listen to it a lot. He joins us on the Adam Gold Show. Sir, I just watched or at least I saw it in the studio here when it was on. You were on Golf Channel. You did not like the process more than who got selected as the Ryder Cup captain, because I guess two things can be true, that the process could be flawed, and they might have ended up at the right spot anyway. But what is your overall takeaway from Keegan Bradley as the Ryder Cup captain?
Yeah, that would be the main thing, is that, this is something that has, in the last 10 years at least on the American side, been very carefully considered. You want people who have been a vice captain beforehand, all that kind of stuff. And this time they just seem to have not only chosen a guy who's never been a vice captain and, who's never been in any leadership position like this, but a guy who didn't even know he was in the running, didn't have his hat in the ring, had no idea he was being considered until they actually phoned him and said, "Congratulations, you're the Ryder Cup captain." And, the process for doing it was the minute Tiger Woods said he couldn't do it, they got together, this 6-person, little committee got together on the phone, looked down a list of names, and supposedly, but according to what they said, immediately chose Keegan Bradley as if it was an obvious answer, when to everyone else it looks like kind of a staggering answer, kind of a shocking answer. So, yeah, the process, I think, was really quick and really haphazard. And, again, maybe they'll get lucky and Keegan will be a really good captain, and that may be the case. But you really have to wonder what they're up to and what they're thinking.
So I remember, and you wrote the piece in Golf Digest about how it all fell apart in 2014 at Glen Eagles, and that triggered that Ryder Cup task force. Did this reject all notions that was a good idea?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, in terms of the people who decided it, Davis Love III and Jim Furyk and Steve Stricker, those have been kind of the guys you associate with the task force. They were not involved in this at all. So it was a little bit of a rebuke of them, I think, which is interesting to me because, okay, they lost in Rome and they lost in Paris, but they did at least turn it around to the degree that they got their blowout wins at home at Hazeltine and at Whistling Straits. Right. So to kind of move past this system and to say, oh, it's dead now, it's pretty questionable to me. And what's even more questionable is that one of the decision makers behind it was Zach Johnson. So here's a guy who, by most accounts, didn't really live up to any kind of standard as the U.S. captain in Rome, and he's got the power to make this decision. So I don't know. I think they are kind of throwing everything out that came before, and I'm not sure that's the smartest thing to do.
No, yeah. The truth is that they're 2-2 in Ryder Cup since the task force. They at least now are winning on home soil. Here's what I don't understand. Let me put this in college sports terminology to people, that every good athletic director has a list in his desk of 5 coaches that he would consider hiring if his coach left. Did anybody at the PGA of America not have that list? And especially here, because most of these people would be really not active players anymore, at least seriously active players on the PGA Tour. Did they not do any due diligence just in case Tiger Woods couldn't do it? And there was a pretty big probability that Tiger Woods wouldn't be able to commit to it?
Yeah, I mean, they had a list, but I think you're right that there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. There were no interviews done. I mean, when I heard Keegan Bradley's name, you're thinking, well, maybe they did a bunch of interviews and he blew them away and he was really good. And that would at least start to make some sense. But yeah, he didn't. Again, Keegan Bradley didn't know he was even being considered. There were no interviews done. They just kind of fired from the hip here out of nowhere. So whether or not they had a list, that's sort of a different question than did they do any kind of due diligence? Did they well, look at who has experience, look who might be good at this. Did they interview anybody? The answer to all those questions are definitely not.
Shane Ryan is joining us here at Shane Ryan here on Twitter. So here's what kind of struck me, because this Ryder Cup, which is going to be at Bethpage next September, wasn't supposed to be Tiger, right? You go back 3 years, they weren't targeting Tiger Woods as the captain of this Ryder Cup. They were thinking about Woods for the one coming up 2 years after that. This was supposed to be Phil Mickelson's Ryder Cup captaincy. The way he is revered, especially in the tri-state area in New York. Why? I mean, maybe the answer is obvious, but why didn't they consider Phil Mickelson here?
Yeah, I think right now the live thing is just a non-starter. I think the minute you went there, you kind of removed yourself from consideration, at least until there's a merger, if there is a merger at some point. And then I think maybe all that gets reset. And it's the same on the European side. Guys like Lee Westwood or Ian Poulter or Sergio Garcia, they are at the moment out of the running and not in consideration for the same reason. So,
right, but that's structural on the European Tour part. It's structural because it's the European Tour that runs the Ryder Cup, right? And those players had to give up European Tour membership, or at least they didn't have to. They chose to, right, to avoid being fined and all of that. None of that happened. I mean, they're suspended from the PGA Tour, but the PGA of America, even before the PGA. And maybe this was just Mike Wan of the USGA suggesting that they would alter qualification process, but I think all of the major championships would like to get the best fields, and they're unaffiliated with the PGA Tour. If we're going to have their players play, why? Right. I mean, I'm not advocating for Phil, but I'm just curious as to, it was never a consideration.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, right? You would think there will be live players, especially someone like Bryson DeChambeau on the team. They're certainly eligible to play, and they did last time, so why can't a captain be from live? And I think the answer is just that, the power-making or the decision-making body is composed all of PGA Tour people.
Right.
So, I mean, now, again, it comes with a few PGA of America executives, but the real power lies in the former captains and the players like Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas, who are on this committee to choose the captain, and they are PGA Tour guys. So, yes, it's a separate organization, but the PGA Tour blood very much runs through it, and so you're just not going to have a live guy at the moment. It's just a fact of life.
And man, I don't disagree with that. By the way, I don't disagree with the reasoning. It's just the whole it seems a contradiction. I agree. I think it would be surprising to me right now if Bryson DeChambeau, unless his game goes south, isn't on that team. We forget. I think there are a lot of people that assume Brooks Koepka made the team on points last time. He didn't. He had to get selected. I mean, I think he was missed by one spot or two spots, and it was an easy one for him to get selected. Not to mention, no player does more to distance himself from live golf than Brooks Koepka ever. He doesn't wear anything that says live on it, and every other player has their live team logo all over their shirts or hats or bags or anything like that. Brooks goes the exact opposite direction there. But I would assume that those two guys likely will be on the team. If somebody else who's American is playing at a high level on live, I would imagine they would be under consideration, because it would be foolish not to send your best team to the Ryder Cup, because I think Europe might have a better team right now, sight unseen, when we get to Bethpage in a year.
Yeah, they may, the only thing I would say to that is that I don't think there's any greater home field advantage in all of sports than home course advantage in the Ryder Cup, and I think that's played out in pretty dramatic ways in the last four. And you could even go back. You could even go back further than that, really. So I think we talk about the captains, we talk about the players, and all that. You got to be careful with that, because in the end, I think it's swamped by the overwhelming most important factor, which is having 60,000 screaming New Yorkers on your side. I think that ends up carrying the day, just like it did in Rome, just like it did in Wisconsin, just like it did in Paris, just like it did in Minnesota. So, we'll see what happens. But I would still pick the Americans despite all of this. if you ask me right now.
All right, one final thing away from the Ryder Cup, and by the way, I mentioned the book, The Cup They Couldn't Lose, about Whistling Straits, really the lead up to it, and the Ryder Cup run, which is a phenomenal. If you're a Ryder Cup fan, there's a lot of history in it, how this became such a big deal, and you find out that Shane Ryan is the biggest Paul McGinley fan in the world, which is fine. I am a big Paul McGinley fan too. Rory McIlory peeled rubber out of the U.S. Open at Pinehurst after he completely gagged on a 2-shot lead with 5 holes to play and lost to Bryson DeChambeau. I don't think it had anything to do with Bryson. I think it was just, how did I not win this one? He says this one wasn't as bad as the one he lost at St. Andrews a couple of years ago. Who am I to rank these? I don't know. I felt like this one was worse. I don't know. I don't even know if you rank him. It certainly wasn't his best moment to not meet the media. What are your thoughts on Rory now as we're less than a week away from the start of the Open Championship?
Yeah, I think he was describing maybe how he felt in the aftermath of them, because I'm with you. The St. Andrews loss was not good, and I'm sure he would have, that would have been the perfect way to break his major droughts to win there. But the Pinehurst loss was far worse in terms of the chokiness of it. He definitely should have won that. He played great most of the day, and then he had these disastrous last few holes where he really booted it away. So who knows what he's thinking there. But, yeah, I mean, Rory, if there's something you give him credit for, he, throughout this whole drought, which is about a decade long now, through all the near misses and the heartbreaks, he keeps putting himself back there over and over. So there's got to be something resilient in the guy. And I tend to believe him, when he says, I'm sure it'll, kind of rankle and everything, but I think he'll come out. I think he'll still play well. I don't think it's going to destroy him or anything like that. It looks like, I think he was 5 under today at the Scottish, so he's right in the mix there. And I'm sure, I don't know if he's going to, win Troon or have a chance to win Troon, but I'm sure he'll play well. It's just a matter of, the really interesting thing will be, the next time he gets in contention on a Sunday, what happens? Does he, the ghosts of these kind of near misses haunt him a little bit, and are we going to see? Is that going to have lingering effects? Is there going to be more breakdowns? All that kind of stuff. And the answer is we don't know until we see it. So we'll see. We'll see if he's better. We'll see if he's refreshed. If he can take the positives from Pinehurst, or if, like I said, that stuff is going to kind of dwell a little bit.
Well, I'm calling it right now. Rory is going to win Troon. I think he is going to win Troon. The devastation at the Masters begat the U.S. Open the next time out. I think he is going to win Troon. But in a way that maybe we don't know. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll go wire to wire. I've always thought that Rory's next major is going to be a little bit like how Payne Stewart had to win his first, coming from well back with a spectacular final round. Who knows? Maybe he wins it like Phil Mickelson, his best friend, won his Open Championship, kind of surprising out of the back of the pack, middle of the pack. Who did he catch? Adam Scott and some others at Muirfield. But who knows? Maybe I'm just rooting too hard for Rory. Shane Ryan here on Twitter. The Cup They Couldn't Lose. Ryder Cup Run, the podcast. Go check it out. Thank you so much, my man.
Thank you, Adam. Always fun.
Shane Ryan, Golf Digest. Honestly, if you're into the Ryder Cup, that podcast is great. It's I'm not going to even say it's fast moving, but it's a story, and it's I think a fascinating story, all of it. But I'm a Ryder Cup geek, so what do I know?